Welcome to Built-in CV.
Welcome to Built-in CV with Daniel H. Brumer, founder of CV Business Law. Daniel is a California business attorney who advises entrepreneurs, operators, family businesses, and growing companies on contracts, business decisions, real estate matters, and outside general counsel needs. I'm Shameika Rhymes, and today we're talking about outside general counsel and why some businesses reach a point where occasional legal help is no longer enough. Welcome back, Daniel.
Thanks, Shameika. Good to see you again.
Good to see you. Well, Daniel, let's talk about it. What does an outside general counsel relationship look like for a small or mid-sized business?
It really looks like another extension of your business, having that legal function inside your business, but from somebody who you don't have to hire and pay full time. It's really somebody who understands the core functions of your business, understands the day-to-day pressures that you're under, and most importantly, I think, understands the constraints and the constructs in which you're operating in your business. For approaching lawyers who aren't familiar with your business on a day-to-day basis, you may find that they would tend to be a bit more risk averse, not really willing to give real world advice just because they're not so familiar with your business. An outside general counsel is not a riskier type of lawyer, but they understand your business almost as much as you do, and they understand that what kinds of risks are tolerable and what kinds of risks that you need to avoid. And so it's really that developing that relationship and getting someone embedded into the company as much as possible to give you the best possible advice.
Well, what starts happening inside a business that makes occasional legal help feel less workable than it used to?
Well, I think what most business owners find unworkable about occasional legal help is that it's really not cost effective. Um, to go to a lawyer for an occasional question here or there, you're paying a billable hour rate and you're paying for someone to get up to speed on your business, to get up to speed on the particular issue you're calling about. And a lot of times you are rebuilding and repaying for that time for somebody to get to know you, to get to be familiar with your business. And so I think it really makes a lot of people apprehensive about calling lawyers um, just on the one occasion where it might be a really, really extreme case where you really need help.
So, what warning signs would suggest that a business is continuously losing money or time by only handling legal things reactively? Like, it's almost like you're putting out little fires here and there.
Right. And unfortunately, a lot of the times you don't know it until you get to that place where you're constantly putting out fires or you're constantly getting batted in the head with legal problems. And so for a lot of folks, the call comes, I wouldn't say too late, but later than they may have otherwise preferred. Right. It doesn't come to the forefront until it's really, really an issue. But the folks who are proactive about it and who develop that relationship again, they tend to have a service provider who knows them in and out, knows their business in and out, and they have that relationship and that ability to call for something that might seem small, or for something that might seem, not worth it to engage a lawyer for. Like I mentioned before, just that time to ramp up and get to know your business. Having an outside general counsel really can give you that flexibility and that comfort to be able to use counsel on more than just the occasion, the large occasion.
It's so interesting to see the parallel between how communications stuff works and the legal stuff works because, I my day job is as a communications manager, and sometimes it's very reactive because we're reacting to, "Oh gosh, there's a crisis over here, there's a crisis over here." So, and it like you said, you're spending money and time trying to catch somebody up to help with certain things, so that makes total sense.
Yeah, and it's the wise ones who realize that early on, and realize that they would rather be paying for proactive services than crisis management. Crisis management is obviously critical, but the hope is that you don't get to that point where you need that service.
Well, what kinds of business decisions benefit most from having legal guidance involved from the beginning before a problem even develops?
I think the two most important areas are probably contract execution and administration and employee hiring and human resource management. Um, Businesses will get hit with contracts probably on a daily basis that they maybe are not familiar with, don't have time to read, don't have time to focus on, but need a decision made relatively fast. And having someone who is, again, part of your business, somebody who is very responsive to your daily needs because you have that daily ongoing relationship with, you have the ability to connect with for those contract issues. And employment, again, just being in California and being a business in California with employees, there are a whole number of issues that you could possibly run into that having counsel early on can really, really save you a lot of time and a lot of money and a lot of problems. Unfortunately, a lot of businesses in on that front wait until it's too late, even to understand their basic obligations or their basic uh, danger zones that they should be concerned about with employment issues. And unfortunately, sometimes it comes too late when the price tag it becomes much higher.
Do you find that this just popped into my head, so forgive me for this one, but do you find that sometimes when they do call a little too late and there is a problem, that they've tried to handle it themselves with, I don't know, the help of AI, since AI seems to be the go-to for a lot of people?
Yes, I'm seeing that a lot, and AI. We can have a whole discussion about this. It's very much a double-edged sword for folks who can't afford legal services. There is something to be said about having resources that you just didn't have before. But at all times, you need to understand that AI is imperfect, inherently imperfect. And although it sounds very confident, it often can give you the wrong answers. I see people come to me with ideas that they've gotten from AI, and it's always helpful. You kind of think of when you go to the doctor. It's helpful to do your research, but if you come in with authoritative knowledge from Dr. Google, a lot of times it really doesn't fly and doesn't pass muster with modern medicine. The same thing goes with the law. AI can be a great tool for people to use, and it helps educate the clients a lot more, and it helps the relationship a lot more when clients are able to have some of that background information, but it's really all about that grain of salt that you have to take it with and, make sure you have that discussion with the professional who's in the best position to understand the information that the AI is giving out to you.
Yeah, we'll have to have a whole discussion about AI because I think we could have a really good informative one on that.
I just did a whole presentation to the Greater Palm Springs Realtors Association about the use of AI and about the obligations of uh, real estate brokers and salespeople, which are similar to the obligations that lawyers have when it comes to AI, in terms of responsible use and being fiduciaries to our clients and protecting our clients' interests. So it's a real fascinating topic that is changing in real time, almost daily, and it's changing the nature of practice and changing the nature of relationships between lawyers and clients, and also making legal services a lot more accessible, not just for DIY folks who want to go on to an AI tool and get the answer themselves, but it is making work in a lot of ways more efficient for lawyers who can now deliver services at maybe a more cost-effective way than they were able to before, which again can make those services more accessible to business owners.
I'm like, let me get us back on track. But how does an outside general counsel relationship differ from hiring a lawyer for a single contract, dispute, or transaction?
Yeah, I think just like we mentioned earlier, it's really just about having that background knowledge, not just of the business, but of the business principal or the business owner, the executive who you're dealing with. For so many of my clients, just by virtue of talking to each other so much on a regular basis, we get to know each other personally Not deeply personal, but personal in a way that we understand each other's personalities, we understand each other's risk tolerances, and how risk averse someone might be, or how more willing somebody might be to take risks. So having that relationship where I can answer the question before I have to ask it, because I already have worked with you for so long and I already know what your answer is going to be, that really helps than hiring somebody for a one-off transaction who doesn't know you, who has to call you with a lot of questions, who has to maybe have their hand held a little bit by the business owner to really get them to understand what the objective is that they're trying to get to, so that that interpersonal relationship that you develop with your client isn't just, good for business upkeep or business practices. It's really helps provide a higher quality service.
Yeah. So, what kinds of day to day business questions make owners appreciate having counsel that they can call without having to start from scratch every single time?
I think the most one that I get most often is for companies in when they have form contracts and they're engaging with a new customer or a new supplier or a new vendor, and the supplier or the vendor has a minor edit to their contract or a request for a revision to their contract. Maybe it has to do with the payment terms, maybe it has to do with insurance requirements, and I get a quick call or a quick email that says, "Hey, Daniel, someone has a question about A, B, and C. Is this something we can live with, or is this something we can't live with?" And I can usually look at it and provide an answer within a pretty quick time frame. So number one, it's not costing you as much as it's going to cost you to call a lawyer and say, "Hey, I need help on this minor issue, but I'm going to have to pay for several hours of your time." So that's what I think I get most often is, can we live with this, or is this something that I need to be more concerned about? And calling me after having that relationship with me for so many months, years, what have you, save them all the time in the world and becomes cost effective right off the bat.
Well, I feel like we've kind of been talking about this, but I'm going to ask it anyway. But what does a healthy outside general counsel relationship actually look like in practice?
It looks kind of like what we're having now, is just regular discussions, picking my brain, asking questions, phone calls. Again, lawyers who charge by the hour, and I do that on some occasions. People are a little reluctant to really sit and have a phone call and explain themselves to their lawyer or understand their lawyer's skill set, because they're really looking at the clock thinking that, kind of like the gas pump ticking, time is just ticking on and on. And as it keeps going, you get more nervous and you're not really thinking of that relationship with your lawyer. You're just thinking of, how much am I paying for all this time that's racking up? So the relationship looks a lot more, um, again, personal, a lot more relaxed, and it becomes a lot more in depth in terms of understanding the problems that the business person is going through and the challenges that they may be facing, and really helping them work through uh, a lot of those challenges.
Well, can ongoing legal counsel change the way that a business makes decisions and not just the way it handles the legal problems?
I think it does. I think more you develop a relationship with your counsel, and the more your counsel interacts with you day to day, you start to think more. I wouldn't say think more like a lawyer, but you start to think more analytically. And you start to think about risk in a different way, not necessarily legal problems, but how is this going to potentially impact my business? And what is the level of risk that I'm taking here? And I think it translates to every aspect of the business, not just on the legal side. And so the more you develop that relationship with your counsel, the more you learn from one another. And I learned so much from my clients, in terms of understanding business better. And the flip side works the same way. My clients understand the law a little bit better, but more so they understand the analytical process a lot better. And that translates and helps them in making their day to day business decisions.
What types of businesses in the Coachella Valley are often a very strong fit for outside general counsel arrangements?
It can really be any kind of business, any service business, hospitality business, especially dealing with a lot of employees, particularly wage earning employees, where the laws and the regulations become much more complex. Um, and the consequences can potentially be a lot more dire. Those types of businesses, I think everyone would benefit from having an outside counsel, to the extent you can't afford an inside general counsel. I think all types of businesses would benefit from it, but particularly businesses who are transacting on a regular basis. In a service business, contracts back and forth, having to purchase materials, manufacturing businesses, those kinds of agreements come up all the time. And hospitality businesses, especially, who are dealing with tons of contracts of all types, both intellectual property, supplying customer contracts, and employee issues.
Daniel, as we wrap up, what are some practical signs that a business may have reached the point where ongoing counsel makes more sense than occasional legal help?
Unfortunately, it's one of those things where you know it when you see it, and when you see it, it sometimes hits hard. And so when it gets to a point where you're constantly thinking to yourself, should I call a lawyer for this, or should I be doing this without the advice of a lawyer? Chances are you're at the point where you should have someone at the ready who you can have engaged, who you can develop a relationship with, who you can develop a cost effective fee structure with. So you don't have to be worrying about every minute of time that you're on the phone with that person, or you don't have to worry about being charged a high amount just for picking up the phone and asking a small question. That's the point, I think, where you're going to realize that this relationship is something that is going to pay dividends much more than it's going to cost.
Well, Daniel, this has been a great conversation. I've learned a lot from you today. So thank you.
Thank you very much. It's been great to talk to you.
Yeah, it's great to talk to you as always. Well, that is it for today's episode of Built in CV with Daniel H. Brumer. If you'd like to learn more about Daniel and CV business law, visit cvbusinesslaw.com. Thank you for listening, and don't forget to like, leave a review, and share this episode with someone who might need it.
Thanks for watching. Be sure to hit that like and subscribe button and leave us a review in the comments.